Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And we are back with our wrap-up of the Olympics, the Summer Olympics 2024 in Paris. Honestly, this one got a little out of hand, listeners. There's a lot to talk about. So if I missed something, please let us know, because this was mostly me. So Samantha, you're going to come along the ride.
I love it.
But I'm sure you'll have thoughts about it. But yeah, there has been a lot of conversation that's come out of it. And unfortunately, because I got so caught up in the controversies, we're not talking too much about some wins that I wanted to talk about. So maybe there will be another one. Maybe there will be another one. Also, the Paralympics are coming up.
Right.
August 28th. We are recording this August 27th. So, hey, tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Also, happy birthday to friend Tyler, who has long worked at our company in its various iterations, and we got to hang out with recently in Washington, D.C., which was cool. Hadn't seen him in a while. Also, kind of related, when I first started, when I was an intern, we used to work in what was called the fishbowl, and it was just the video department did, and I was on the video department at the time. And so it was just like a circular glass bowl, and people could see inside. And there was another woman who worked with me, but she rarely came in. So it was me and like 7 guys, all who were cool and I'm still friends with. Tyler was one of them. But one day, one of our bosses came in and he was announcing that he was quitting and he was going to WWE. And he looked directly at me and he said, "I know you're a girl and you don't get it." Yeah. And I was like,
Fighting
whatever. I don't get it. So whatever. Then he left and Tyler looked at me and he was like, "I don't get it either." So you good. So thank you, Tyler. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yes. Unfortunately, there is a content warning for this one. For transphobia, fat phobia, discussion of weight. Yeah. There's some stuff I was getting riled up last night, Samantha, when I was researching. Woo. So yeah, for this episode, we're going to do some brief overviews on the ups and downs of this Summer Olympics. And we have done 3. I think we did Feminists Around the World. We did one of those, and then we did 2 Monday Minis related to this Olympics. So we've done a couple of things. Also see our past Olympics episodes for more on this. But we did want to touch on the fact that the host city, Paris, was really touting this being the first gender equal Summer Olympics. So let's break that down a bit. When it comes to the U.S., Team U.S. did send more women than men for the 4th straight Summer Olympics, 314 women to 278 men. When Paris last hosted the Olympics, by the way, of over 3,000 athletes, about 135 were women. So we have come a long way, but there's still room for improvement, because as we all know, this metric is not the only thing to take into account. In the words of Purdue University professor who studies this kind of thing, Cheryl Cookie, quote, "Yes, the IOC has achieved gender parity if we're looking at this specific indicator or criteria of gender equity. And there are still ways that women athletes are not given the same kinds of quality of opportunities, same types of resources, investments, and so on." So she was saying, like, both can be true. Others have pointed out that in general, the delegations can be pretty uneven. Some may bring a lot of women, some may bring no women. This was the first Olympics to institute caps on the number of athletes that could be sent after there had been steady growth that led to a record of 11,000 athletes in Tokyo. So the cap was set at 10,500 plus backups, half for women, half for men.
Right. So here's a quote from the AP. "There's still a slight edge toward men among the 329 medal events at the Paris Olympics. The IOC has said there are 157 men's events, 152 women's events, and 20 mixed gender events. Of the 32 sports, 28 are, quote, fully gender equal," the IOC said, including the new event of breaking to music. Rhythmic gymnastics is still for women only, but men are allowed to compete in artistic swimming, in track and field, which has qualifying standards that athletes must reach. There are 50 more registered for the men's events than women's, 1,091 to 1,041. In swimming, the difference was 464 to 393. In soccer, with 16 teams in the men's tournament and just 12 in the women's, the athlete tally was 351 to 264. The wrestling entry has 193 men and 96 women, with a men's only category in Greco-Roman. You know what? I don't know if I would know the difference of what that is, to be fair, with a WWE question. So leadership is an area that has a lot further to go in terms of gender parity. At these Olympics, 42% of the coaches were women, which is way up from a decade ago. Women make up 33% of the IOC's executive board, and women lead 42% of their commissions, which we did talk about earlier.
We did, and there was a big scandal about this at the last Summer Olympics in Tokyo, where basically one of the higher-ups was like, women talk too much at meetings, and that's why he did it.
I remember that. Oh, yeah. My God. We were like, why would you say, do you just want people to hate you? Like, I don't.
I know. And speaking of, there were, as we discussed, instances of sexism from commentators. There was one that was fired for making a sexist remark about the Australian women's swim team. And there was another that said it was pretty bad as well. He did not get fired, but it was like, what are you doing?
Right.
Why would you say that?
It's 2024.
Why would you say that? And yeah, there's other things related to that. Like some have critiqued the camera angles used for women's sports as compared to men's. We're going to talk about the uniforms. We've talked about the uniforms before.
Mm-hmm.
We'll touch on them again in a second. These Olympics did put in place non-mandatory guidelines for giving women's sports more coveted time slots and coverage. As we did discuss, women's basketball and the women's marathon closed out these Olympics, which is usually it's men's events that close out the Olympics. But still, yeah, things haven't been smooth sailing completely. There's a lot of progress that has been made, a lot to be made in the future. So we did want to go through some of the bigger controversies. There are a lot. Again, if we miss some, let us know if there's something you think we should talk about.
There's so many.
One that's ongoing is in gymnastics. So this is, it's an ongoing mess in the women's individual floor routine medal. And like I said, I watched a lot of Olympics live because the time zone was such that I was able to do that. Sometimes, it's the middle of the night wherever they're taking place and I don't get to see it. But this time I was able to see a lot of stuff live. I saw this happen live. And this is how it unfolded as a viewer. Simone Biles has got a solid silver. Brazilian gymnast Rebecca Onjanji was a lock for gold. But the bronze medal scoring changed, bumping U.S. gymnast Jordan Chiles from 5th into bronze medal position over Romania's Anna Barbosu. And this is because her coach petitioned, seemingly successfully, to up her difficulty score for an uncredited move that she did. So she should have gotten more points. And the difficulty score went up. Her score went up. She gets the bronze. And there was a lovely picture that was taken on the medal podium of both Chiles and Biles bowing to Ondraji, the first medal ceremony of its kind featuring all Black women. But Romania was very unhappy about this. Understandably, I would say. A flurry of things happened. Chiles' coach inquiry was voided because it was determined she'd made it 4 seconds too late because you have 1 minute to make it. This put Chiles back in 5th place. U.S. officials appealed that. The Court of Arbitration of Sport refused to reconsider their decision, even in light of new proof that allegedly showed the inquiry being completed in time. Chiles was ordered to return her medal. Barbosu got a separate medal at a small ceremony. There were stories of things just getting sent to wrong emails, the wrong people being notified, all kinds of things. It was a huge mess. It continues to be a huge mess because it's not over.
Right. Like there's new inquiries happening. One went from the U.S. to backtrack that. And then another one from Romania to backtrack that. controversies and then like theories that there's a dude who was on the committee that was Romanian based. That you're like, oh dear, oh dear. I don't quite understand why they would not allow. There can be an appeal and an appeal to the appeal. Why can't there be another appeal? Because they blocked that last appeal for some odd reason.
Yeah.
With photo proof.
Right. Yes. And you can look into there. There is a lot being discussed about, connections to Romania by some of the people on the board. You can look into that. There is another, quote, conspiracy theory that upon replay, the other Romanian gymnast, Sabrina Manisha Voena, received a deduction for stepping out of bounds, but she actually didn't, meaning she should have gotten the bronze.
But then that's the other conversation then. They're way too late. Like, they're just about a week or two late. Like, that should not even be a conversation then. If that's, like, there's so many conversations.
I don't think I could be wrong, because this is a mess. I don't think she's, like, actually appealing. I'm just saying, I think people are saying, well, clearly something, we weren't paying attention to the right things in this, or it wasn't being scored properly. Unfortunately, this is something that's going to come up a lot in this when I was doing this research. Social media backlash. Whoa. The backlash against Childs, a lot of it was very racist in nature, was intense. And she posted on social media, "I have no words. This decision feels unjust and comes as a significant blow, not just to me, but to everyone who has championed my journey." She later took a break from social media for her mental health. And a lot of her teammates have been very outspoken and supportive of her. And USA Gymnastics is continuing to pursue this issue. In my opinion, this is a IOC governing body problem, and neither athlete should be punished for their failures.
Right.
Like, I feel like she shouldn't have to go through the ringer because you awarded her a bronze.
Right. I think there's this conversation we've been kind of having, because we've seen so many like questionable decisions by referees and officials and like all these things, that it's just kind of like, is this legit? Are you doing something that is sketchy? Are you not reconsidering things? Are these rules outdated, much like some of the laws we have in real life? Like, there's so many to that conversation, especially when you have people who, that's heart-wrenching, and on international TV, like the reaction of Childs, like for the US people were like, yay, and she gets to like celebrate the bronze, but then the reaction of the Romanian who was crushed because for a good like 10 minutes she really thought she won. Like there's so many things to this that's like in conversation about who is seen as the authority and about whether or not they understand. And I say that for all the events because we saw things happening in tennis. Same things happening and like so many other things, whether it's referees making bad calls. We saw things happening in basketball, men and women's. You were like, what is going on?
Yes. And I want to add two things to that. In my previous Monday Mini, where I was just kind of gushing about things I saw that I liked, I talked about how the soccer, one of the women who was commentating the women's soccer match really went in about like, we're not putting the health of athletes first. And I saw another article that followed up on that about this whole thing that was like, this debacle is cruel. Like, ultimately, it's kind of cruel to your athletes that are doing this. And it's on you. You're the ones that made the mistakes.
Right.
But they're the ones that are dealing with this.
Right.
Yeah.
And being like literally being harassed for the day, things that they don't have anything to do with. It's not a personal vendetta against other athletes. I mean, maybe there is. I don't know. I don't know about gymnastics, but you know, sometimes basketball, when they have like direct contact, seems heated. But but I mean, they're not. They have not even honestly mentioned each other, except for like we have complete respect for the other athletes. It's a whole level. And then this going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
That's got to be mentally taxing.
Yeah. And I feel like as a viewer, sometimes we can forget that that's like your whole life and it happens every 4 years and you might not be there the next 4 years. This is like a huge deal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. The other thing I did want to mention, just because I feel like I should, this is definitely not the first time somebody's medal has been taken away, but what makes it unique is every other time it's usually had to do with doping or some other scandal, like something. So it did have, like, for instance, the U.S. skating team from the Winter Olympics 2 years later just got their medals because it took that long to adjudicate it.
It's true.
So it could take a while, unfortunately, because I can only imagine how miserable this is.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that. And now let us talk about breaking. It is called breaking, breakdancing. A lot of people call it, but it is breaking.
It's interesting because it is a U.S. based activity sport. I've never heard anyone say breaking.
I haven't either. And I usually say breakdancing because no one knows what I'm talking about when I say breaking. But that's what it was called. And there's probably a reason to that. Which, speaking of, this is just going to be a snippet of what happened at this.
I'm not going to lie, I giggled when I saw this topic. I giggled again just now.
I feel like we had to talk about it. But there is a lot more stuff that we can and probably should come back and talk about with this. This is just going to be a brief overview of what happened. Because again, I was watching this live and I was like, whoa. So I also, I'm not going to go too in depth about it because I feel like it has been done to death in the news. But yeah, we do need to talk about women's breaking in the Olympics. So this was the first and potentially last Olympic Games to feature breaking, though that decision had already been made and had nothing to do with what happened here. It had been made in 2023. Snoop Dogg opened the event, which was cool. Yes, I watched it live and I was flummoxed. There were really like so many impressive things. And then there were things that I was like, yep, that's white people cosplaying as black people. It just had a vibe that I couldn't quite pin down.
The amount of teams that didn't have people of color on their teams was shocking. And I'm not going to say, so like we know that a lot of countries, there's not a lot of diversity in that country, which is another thing we should question of like, why aren't you? What is happening there that is not welcoming? Or is it other issues? There's so many things. So that's a controversial statement in itself. But the fact that we did have countries that do have a pretty diverse community still didn't. And I was like, and even with the US, I was still kind of confused. There were a few, there were all people of color, if I remember correctly. But only a few came from like Black or Latino backgrounds. So I'm like, question mark? But that's, again, a whole different episode.
Yeah, just because of the history.
Yeah.
Which we did briefly touch on that in
we did.
Hip-hop,
in the history of hip-hop,
Yes,
women in hip-hop.
Which was one I felt very awkward talking about, but was important to talk about. So check that
one out.
We
talked about big girls, yeah.
Yes, we did. And I will say, like, the unfortunate thing about this, which I'm going to talk about a little more, there was like people who were doing amazing work. They really were. And we're just not talking about them. We're talking about not that.
Which may be part of the problem. Like that's part of the controversy too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But there were people I was watching. I was like, damn, that's amazing. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack here because it was the first time. So there was a lot riding on this event. It was very highly advertised. It was the only new sport added to this year's Olympics. There were a lot of questions about how to score it. And they remain. Two, we can't just ignore the fact of, yes, the history of breaking being rooted in Black culture. And so both of those questions sort of intertwine with breaking, the soul of it. And so three, should it even be an Olympic sport? Not because it isn't athletic, but like, how do you judge it? The hip hop scene is pretty anti-establishment. And the Olympics is like the establishment in sports. However, on the other side of that, it could bring knowledge and attention to something lesser known, inspire others to get involved. It also should be recognized and given attention. So I've seen like arguments on all around all of those things.
Yeah. I mean, the question is the Olympics the appropriate place? Like, what type of attention are you giving it? Are you giving it its full respect? The scoring. Who is scoring it? Like all of those questions, like who have you brought in to score this? Also, the music was
Yeah,
interesting.
the music was interesting. The music was interesting. So yes, the most obvious example of what kind of went wrong here is Australian Rachel Gunn, or Reagan, who's a 36-year-old white academic who has a PhD in breaking. There has been so much discussion about how in the world she qualified. Although I will say most of the conspiracy theories about how she cheated or rigged her way in are largely untrue, about who she might have blocked entry from. It is true that the breaking community where she came from is very small, and the entry fees and travel costs are prohibitive, which I think is another part of the conversation, sort of what you were talking about, Samantha, which always does have issues of class and race around it. And I do think Reagan needs to ponder about all this. But I once again think maybe we should be putting more blame on the organizations that allow for this.
Right. I mean, there's, again, because it was a huge thing and there was a lot of back and forth and people were like praising her for the confidence she had and the entertainment that she gave. Again, also really like going after her because they felt like she was mocking what this was. And though she said she knew she couldn't win, like she put that as a statement, she was giving her all. Like people were trying to figure out if this was performative and this is a part of her academic work that she was trying to do, which I even mentioned that in an episode. I was like, is it? Maybe? I don't know. Because she has deep research about cultural content like this. But I think there's also that bigger question. Like her specific team started going in on, and we are an intersectional feminist show, as a reminder. And apparently that's a really hard term to remember. And I feel like we need to go back to that because we had a whole incident. That's a bias, but that's another story. But that they were attacking her because she was a woman. And that they were like, if this was a man doing this, we're like, okay, we're all about when sexist conversations happen. Your Australian counterpart did it. He did it correctly. He did it well. Like they did start showing him, be like, yeah, he actually knew what he was doing. He had a lot of experience, and he's like, I think 19, so very young. So all these level of conversation was like, no. I think they immediately came in about her outfit. And for some reason, it did look differently on her than it did on him. And it may have been like how she like wore it or whatever, whatnot. And that's not the important part. But it just was one more part to, yeah, this seems like a caricature of what this event was supposed to be. Like literally putting on a whole show as if you were trying to make yourself stand out in this specific way. So there's a lot of that. And maybe there's some comments that I miss. And for y'all who have maybe paid more attention to this or seen more content about this, I don't think any of the conversations was out that they just didn't like her because she's a woman. Because we had plenty of women who did amazing. The Chinese breaker who did an amazing job, she won. And she won fair and square. It was really well done. Still, like that this is not that. And that's what they really wanted to jump on, which I think was a huge mistake. It is. And it's somewhat insulting to all the other athletes there who didn't have to have that conversation. And I'm not sure if it's because she didn't do like the athleticism level that everybody else did. I know part of the scoring was originality, and I'm sure that's that 1 point she got, even though she got 0. So there's a lot to this. And if you're from Australia, because I know we have a few listeners, I need to know your take. Y'all need to tell me.
Yeah, well, so I was reading a lot about this because there's been a lot written about this. And I read a lot from the Australian breaking community. I will say I'm not part of that community, so I can't really speak to it. But I will say that in the articles I read, people were talking about how it's evolved in different places, and people were talking about how it can look differently in different places, and yeah, again, like how do you score it when it's so difficult to score? But yes, Reagan once again got a ton of abuse online. The AOC even released a 12-point fact check to combat all the mis and disinformation about her. But so have many young breakers, many girls and women in Australia and nearby. So yeah, listeners, if you know about that, let us know. And as I said, it's unfortunate because all of this has overshadowed the winners and those who were looking to this movement to put breaking on the global stage and have a bigger conversation about it. So,
right. I mean, we're having a conversation about it. I will say, this event could have just like died away and no one really cared. She did do something. She brought it to the attention. Not the best. Not the best. I do know that she stayed in Paris for a long while with her husband. And the videos that I've seen with both her and her husband, they are similar in style. Let's talk about the boxer and the lawsuit. I feel like that's the story in itself.
I know.
Children's story, right? The way I put it. So in our recent Olympics episode, we discussed all the controversy around Algerian boxer Iman Khalif. If you need to, take a listen, take a pause. Or go see a TikTok. There's so much information. Hopefully the right side. Is kind of complicated, but essentially the IOC no longer accepts the authority of the IBA, the International Boxing Association, since it's headquartered in Russia. The IBA disqualified both Khalif and Taiwanese boxer Lin Yuting in a decision that IOC labeled as sudden and arbitrary and without any due process. This means the IOC is in control of the athletes that can compete in Olympic boxing, not the IBA. So the IOC backed Khalif, who went on to win the gold medal, Algeria's first women in boxing, and returned to a hero's welcome in her hometown. Yes, she deserved it. Congratulations. Everybody clap. Notably, neither had issues competing before. In Khalif's case, this disqualification happened after she defeated a Russian boxer, which we did talk about. And the president of the IOC said, "We have two boxers who are born as women, who have been raised as women, who have a passport as a woman, and who have competed for many years as women." And by the way, it wasn't, and they had done so and lost many, and they didn't pay attention to them until they won.
Yes. Which I will come back to. Okay. That being said, the online uproar about Khalif's gender after these unspecified failed tests from the IBA was immense. From Time magazine, quote, "Despite being born and raised as a woman, she found herself in the crosshairs of Western debates about gender, sex, and sports after failing unspecified and untransparent eligibility tests for women's competition from the now banned International Boxing Association in 2023. It even drew in high-profile names that we wish we didn't have to discuss, like Elon Musk, J.K. Rowling, Logan Paul, though he later deleted his post and said he might be guilty of spreading misinformation, and Donald Trump, who all referred to her as a man in abusive social media posts. So yes, this just happened. As I said, today is August 27th, but I think it was last night. So J.K. Rowling took a break after she got sued, which we're going to talk about in a second, by Iman Khalif. But she's back. She first tweeted under a photo of Khalif's bout with Italian boxer Carini, "The smirk of a male who knows he's protected by a misogynist sporting establishment, enjoying the distress of a woman he's just punched in the head." And quote, "Watch this whole thread, then explain why you're okay with a man beating a woman in public for your entertainment. This isn't sport. From the bullying, cheat, and red all the way up to the organizers who allowed this to happen, this is men reveling in their power over women." That was what she first tweeted. And so then Musk and Trump joined in, and Trump promised to keep men out of women's sports if he was elected. And then, she took this break, and now she's back, and she tweeted about the lawsuit. "It's important to highlight that launching a PR campaign and applying layers of thick makeup requires far more time and effort than simply making DNA test results public," which, as many people pointed out, is very bizarre to ask for someone's DNA test results.
Oh my God.
Yes. She's like the aunt.
Oh, I hope she takes all her money.
Oh.
At this point, I want Iman to own all of Harry Potter content so we can go back and enjoy it.
Yeah. Yep. That would be nice.
But here's the other part to this, and I'm just gonna quickly say this. We know she comes from a country that does not welcome the trans community openly. There's so much irony and concern to this implication worldwide. This is a whole understanding of conversations of yes, we want her to take the stand, but is this also doing a precedent about biological women, which is already concerning.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it also became very It became a big deal for Algeria in a lot of ways, who felt that their country was being attacked.
Right.
So it did become a very patriotic issue, which also can be messy. But yes, this lawsuit we've been alluding to, after the Olympics concluded, Khalif filed a lawsuit against Twitter/X alleging cyber harassment in France, a sustained, quote, misogynist, racist, and sexist campaign, and she named Musk and Rowling in it. And I will tell you, the laws in the European Union around this are stricter than what they are in the US. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. It would be nice if she won. That would be lovely.
So many things to that. Like, there's so many wins to this that were like a win's a win. Like, take them down to at least consider what they're saying.
Yeah, because it was huge. It was a huge backlash. Like, those tweets I read, they had like 200 million views.
And that's not including like the publications that took it and ran with it.
Right. And like, that was one of the first things I saw when I was researching last night on YouTube. It was a bunch of videos of like, is she a man or a woman? Which again is messed up conversation to be having in the first place for a lot of reasons.
Right.
For a lot of reasons. But as you said, Samantha, it is interesting that no one seemed to care until she started winning. And I found a related quote from PBS. Skeet shooting was an open sport in Barcelona in 1992 when Zhang Shan, a Chinese woman, won the gold medal. Subsequently, skeet shooting became segregated by gender. There's nothing in the record that says, and then once a woman won, we decided to have gendered categories, but the timing is notable, Donnelly said.
I'm just baffled. Like, people will talk about, like, yes, we do want equality. We do want all these things, and be like, oh, but we meant equal as in, like, you are lesser than us still. Right. Like, we might not say it out loud.
Right. Wait, you could win? Oh, no.
Our ego. If you're harming our ego, we definitely can.
Right. Now, whoa, we've got to do something about this.
We got to stop this.
Right.
They'll take over the world.
Right. Yeah. And I will say it has been heartening to see people who have competed against her being like, no, she's just that good. Or like, which you did talk about in the previous episode. It was Feminists Around the World, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's been heartening. I like that. But this is like ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Which does bring us to, the question of gender at large at the Olympics. Because it is still a gender binary that leaves out or even prohibits non-binary, intersex, or transgender competitors often. There are a couple of exceptions. And as many have pointed out, historically, transgender women are the ones that face more scrutiny and testing. So you can go check out our past Olympics episodes for more, but the IOC does not have a great record at this at all, where they would used to like, what were they called? Nude parades. There's like a lot of disturbing stuff in the history around this. In 2021, they essentially threw the issue to sports organizations, which is sort of the same as we're like leaving abortions up to the states here in the US, if you will. So you can see the problem. It's not consistent. Several organizations have banned trans people. Some have banned them with very specific rules, like when did you transition, things like that. Also, brief note about the uproar around the quote drag Last Supper tableau at the opening ceremony. Though the artist does maintain it was not mocking Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper, but one of the participants has filed a complaint against online harassment and abuse because this was, of course, featured on Fox News as being like the worst thing ever. And Donald Trump said it was horrendous or some variation of that. So they got a lot of hate online as well.
Why can't people just say, I don't like this? And if it's not actually damaging, just move on.
I wish.
Like to themselves. Don't need to say it out loud.
Right.
Just move on.
Yeah. Don't like, don't read. Fan fiction. The rules. Okay. This is another one. This is a quick thing. It just caught my attention about what was being called extreme fan culture in China. So China started cracking down on fans of athletes, leading to at least one arrest and a handful of people being detained for defamation.
Oh. So here's a quote from the New York Times. Celebrities globally have to deal with fans who are sometimes invasive, but in China, this phenomenon can be especially intense. Fan groups spend lavishly on products endorsed by their idols, deploy bots to ensure their favorites stay atop social media trending lists, and even mount harassment campaigns against other stars and their supporters. Some fans stalk their idols and sell their photos or personal information.
So athletes have been hounded at airports, harassed online, and seen their hometowns flooded with visitors. Rival supporters get into vicious online battles, and some have reported them being visibly aggressive. At least one athlete said he would have rather performed worse and been left alone. Others have said that they were afraid to return home. Others have had family members contact them and told them not to return home. One of the most severe instances of this was during the women's table tennis match between two Chinese players, which I did watch live, and I was like, oh, in which people were firmly in one of the two camps. There was a lot of booing. Women's diving played out similarly. The government removed tens of thousands of social media posts in China for, quote, inciting conflict. 2 women were detained. And obviously, there's a lot more going on here that we can unpack, but the theme of social media keeps popping up again and again. Everything I was like, oh, yeah.
We talked about this with the K-pop history. Like, people who stan, and especially in Asian culture, and I could be wrong, I guess the US has its individual stalkers, but we don't see it to the level that we see in some things. And K-pop stans where they literally find where they're going to be at the airport, have incidents where they like come through and block their ways. People try to send odd things. Again, like the U.S. have had a few things, but we don't typically. I could say I'm wrong because I know like NSYNC fans at the shows and going to meetups, but I like rarely see like that level of devotion, but also so much level of devotion that they're fighting who they think are rivals.
Yeah,
and somewhat made up rivals. Like they're can you not enjoy both or not? Like we make jokes about the Backstreet Boys versus NSYNC. But anyway, rivalry back from like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, but there's not like, I hate you. Like I want Backstreet Boys to float away and go to an island or anything. Like that's not a thought process for most of us. And I'm not sure and I say K-pop stans because it may not be based in Asia either. Like there's a base there, but then outside of that, there's just as many diehards to that point. Like I've seen this recently with like BTS, Suga, or Yoongi just got into trouble, and like they're intense. Like rivals of that band are like telling people that he has to be outed from BTS, which is already an established group that has made billions of won in Korea. So that's not going to happen. So it's just kind of interesting the depth that people will go to, like buying trucks to say, I hate this person, get them out, to sit in front of like agencies.
Yeah. And this was obviously, we'll have to come back and talk about this more, but a lot of the articles were talking about how it was interesting that it was like in the table tennis example, it's kind of a national sport in China. So it's very popular.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's huge. And so and then they also pointed out diving had a similar 2 women who were friends, Chinese women who were friends, getting like just torn apart.
There's fanfic lore about them, by the way.
I believe it. I
think that, like, I remember seeing a TikTok about it. I was like, oh, they stand.
100% believe that. But that it's 2 women from the same country. Right. And usually, well, I won't say usually, this is only 2 examples, but what they were saying was in both cases, there's like one who kind of represents an older generation and one who kind of represents a younger generation. And so it's almost a generational like divide.
Right.
But it was very intense. And it was also talking about just how athletes in China specifically have reached that level of stardom that used to be more reserved for celebrities or singers or something like that, but now it's athletes.
Yeah, China, we know, in South Korea, North Korea, definitely have athletes that they have groomed their entire lives. So this is their livelihood, but if they fail, they fail alone. If they win for with the country. Yep. Like it's just a different level. And though we do love our athletes, they oftentimes have to have another job.
Yeah.
Like they cannot live off of the earnings of the competitions all the time because it's also taxing for their body and they have to retire early. Like we know all this. As where other places do a whole different level of like elevated status.
Right.
You're big, but you have to get Simone Biles big to make money. If you're a bronze winner, if you're like every now and again, like, and if you're not a winner at all, absolutely not.
Right.
They don't even focus on you, which is unfortunate. It's a whole different level. But I find that interesting because culturally, the importance of like representing your country is different.
It is. And that used to, I mean, we've discussed before, I get stressed a lot when I watch the Olympics. But that used to be one of my big things. Is I was like, I feel like I'm feeling fear from you, like absolute fear when you fail, which freaks me out. One of the reasons this conversation did come up is that I can't remember his name, but the Chinese swimmer that won. He had a huge social media following and he deleted all of it because he was like, it's so toxic. And so that's part of what jump-started this conversation. All right, now we're going to briefly touch on uniforms. We've already talked at length about the uproar around Nike's Team USA uniform reveal for track and field and how on the mannequin, the women's uniform looked extremely revealing compared to the men's uniform. You can see the episode we did for more on that. But that was not the only drama around clothing. The IOC ruled that athletes were allowed to wear hijabs or headscarves. However, French athletes themselves were prohibited from wearing them, with the ruling body claiming that it would be an inappropriate display of a religious symbol at one of the world's largest events. This is a big law in France. Does it get consistently used? No, but there is a whole law that they have around that. Okay, so because of that, there is an activist organization in France trying to combat this called Basket pour tous, Basketball for All. An estimated 10% of the French population is Muslim. And as some have rightly pointed out, it seems that Christian crosses on necklaces are just fine.
Right.
But in the words of Amnesty International researcher Anna Blues, quote, by proudly claiming that the games will be gender equal, the French authorities are exposing their own hypocrisy of celebrating such alleged advancements while at the same time discriminating against Muslim women and girls through hijab bans in sports. And as a reminder, while more research is needed, several studies that have been conducted suggest that uniform things like this deter women from participating in sports, whether it is the sexualized uniform or something like this, because they did interview young Muslim girls who were like, well, I guess I can't play then. So that's a big deal and something we should be talking about more. Also, just briefly, politics. It's always interesting to watch the Olympics because, you know, not everyone gets along. So you got all these countries here, and there's just some real delicate dancing of what's going on. And yeah, the politics of the Olympics are generally messy because, yeah, it doesn't erase what's happening in the world. So, for instance, there were a lot of scandals and issues around Russia, but I did want to highlight one women-based one around Afghanistan. Under Afghanistan's Taliban regime, women are prohibited from participating in sports. However, 3 women were allowed to attend the Olympics to compete, though the government did not officially recognize them, instead only recognizing the 3 men in the delegation. The fact that the IOC allowed Afghanistan to compete gave legitimacy to the unrecognized Taliban regime, at least according to a lot of stuff I read and a lot of the thought pieces I read about it, and undermined any goals of gender parity, according to some. A woman from Afghanistan who was competing in the breaking contest was disqualified for displaying a flag that read "Free Afghan Women." Because again, you're not supposed to have political symbols at the Olympics.
Right. Yeah, which is brave on her anyway, in general.
Yeah. And then I know we've talked about this before, but just to note, as we've discussed, sporting events like this tend to cost exorbitant amounts of money, typically don't pay off, and harm those that are most marginalized. There was a lot of discussion around the unhoused and migrants being hidden away, forced out. And these are people who could use government support while that money is going to a new stadium that may or may not be used again. Maybe they could have used something else that was already pretty good. On top of that, there were stories of unpaid and underpaid migrant labor being used to construct these stadiums or things like that. So, yep. So that brings us to some wins. Like I said, I kind of ran out of steam. I was getting all riled up. And this is like, I'm sure there's so much more we could talk about, but I did want to talk about some, ended on a little bit of an upbeat. So yes, I despite all of this, and I know there's a lot more, there were plenty of uplifting wins for women. We already went over some of them, but here's a few. And let us know if there's one you really want us to talk about, because there were so many records broken and so many first. Yes, especially listeners around the world. Please write in and let us know.
Yeah.
One thing I want to shout out is that there were several older women competing this time around.
Yeah.
A lot of times in the Olympics, it can be they're 25, they're ancient. Which, by the way, I did see a list that put Simone Biles on the older end. And I get it, like, historically, yes, but she's 27.
Historically, for the gymnastics. Right, for gymnastics in itself, they usually don't. Like, remember back in the day, they were all like 18, 17. Yeah. They're like, what? Or 16. I mean, we have skaters that are 14 years old.
Oh, I saw a pretty cute interview with one of the skaters. It's like, oh my God, you're so young. But yeah, there were a lot more across the spectrum. There were plenty of young competitors that were so inspiring, and there were plenty of older competitors that were so inspiring. It was not equal by any means, but it was cool to like see the mix. And it was cool to hear like younger players talking about someone they might be competing with or competing against and how they inspired them. That was really neat. So just a few things. In track and field, the U.S.'s Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone beat her own record in the 400-meter hurdles. In swimming, USA's Katie Ledecky performance put her at her 4th Olympic Games, gave her 8th medal. She's tied for most gold medals earned in women's swimming and most gold medals won by a woman Olympian. Simone Biles won the gold medal for the vault named after her. I did see a quote from her recently where she was like, I will never do it again because I did it good enough. And that's it.
I'm done.
I was perfect. I have no notes. I'm good.
Done.
Yeah.
No notes.
She is the most decorated U.S. gymnast in Olympic history. And then I wanted to talk about this because recently when I did my overview of things I really enjoyed or got sucked into when I was watching the Olympics, some of you may have noticed a glaring omission. I did not mention women's rugby. I missed it, which is a shame because it sounds like it was a real roller coaster of a game. I was watching some of the clips last night. Ooh, I would have been so tense. A good chunk of my friends in college played rugby at one time or the other, so I do have like fond memories of it. Although they usually got injured pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. When I look at rugby, I'm like, wow, damaging. Mm-hmm. I will say, I also did not watch it, but the clips that I've seen, perfection.
Oh, so good.
Perfection.
So good. And I've loved reading the quotes about it. It's so great. Anyway, the U.S. women's rugby team pulled off a surprise upset, beating Australia for a bronze. The U.S. women's first ever medal in sevens, as it's called. This win spurred a whole bunch of interest and donations for women's rugby, including some celebrities. But
including some millions of dollars.
I know.
They're about to up their game.
They are
Watch
about to
out.
up their game. Oh, it was so good. But throughout all of this, there was discussion about player Ilona Maher's body type and her BMI that has been going on online. So here's a quote from People. And this is a TikTok comment exchange. Quote, I bet that person is a 30% BMI, wrote one commenter, who has since deleted their account on one of Maher's TikTok videos, which prompted the Olympian to film a response. Hi, thank you for this comment. I think you were trying to roast me, but this is actually a fact. I do have a BMI of 30, well, 29.3 to be exact. Maher began in her video, which has been viewed more than 4.3 million times and liked more than 629,000 times.
Right. And she went on and saying, I remember vividly in high school one time, I had to turn a physical into the office, and right at the bottom of the page, it said overweight. And I was so embarrassed to turn that in and have that written there, she said. My whole life, I've been this way. BMI doesn't tell you what I can do. It doesn't tell you what I can do on the field, how fit I am. It's just a couple of numbers put together, Mar said. It doesn't tell you how much muscle I have or anything like that. So yeah, I do have a BMI of 30. I am considered overweight. And by the way, even before, she has been a huge catalyst on like body image, being feminine while not being what was considered feminine at the time, and loving herself and loving her body and just like she's hilarious on TikTok.
Yeah.
If you have a chance to watch any of her, which that's how I found her, not because of rugby, because I know nothing, but because of TikTok. And that was like over a couple of years ago. I was like, who is this funny person? And should I like her? She is funny.
Yeah. Yeah, she's been around for a long time doing this. And we discussed when I was doing my like what I loved about this Olympics. I said there's a lot of memes. There's a meme of her just like powering through the field, like knocking people over.
Yes, like literally grabbing someone by the face and slamming them to the ground. One of my favorites. It made no sense. I just sat there. It's like, what?
I did appreciate when I was reading this, I took a risk and I read some of the comments under the People article. And people were like, did the commenter win a bronze medal?
Right.
I think not. Like, people were on her side, and it made me very happy to see that, because that often is not the case in our online spaces. But I appreciated that. In a different post, she said, as the Olympics officially start today, I want you all to take a look at all the different body types on display. All body types matter. All body types are worthy, from the smallest gymnast to the tallest volleyball player, from a rugby player to the shot putter to a sprinter. All body types are beautiful and can do amazing things. So truly see yourself in these athletes and know that you can do it too.
I don't know. I definitely can't run. I fall a lot.
You'll find a sport for you.
Yeah. I was actually pretty good at discus throwing, to the point that I did it accidentally. And we had, the summer children's games, essentially school games, they assign you like it's an Olympics. They assigned me that, and I flopped.
What?
Like, because I was so good when I didn't know what was happening. And I was like, oh yeah, I can throw this discus. And they're like, oh, you do so amazing. We're going to put you on the team. I was like, okay, what? And then I flopped real hard. I think it didn't go anywhere. I think it went the opposite direction. It was one of those. I was like, I gotta go home now.
I understand. Sometimes something goes wrong. The pressure gets to you. Something. And you just doesn't work out.
I want to say I was in the third grade. It was sad.
Yeah, that's all right.
Scarred, obviously.
Maybe it's time for you to have a comeback.
I don't think so. I've been scared ever since.
Okay. All right. Well, there has been, unfortunately, there's been so much criticism and judgment of women's bodies. There always is at these kinds of things. So I think it's got better. I was pleasantly surprised, as I said, that the comments under this article were very supportive. And that's part of why I'm putting this in the win column.
Yes.
Because I feel like history is on her side. And I'm glad that she is here saying it, and that the rugby team is getting all of this recognition rightfully.
Yeah. I'm excited to see. I'm hoping, kind of like how women's soccer, and I know men's soccer for a while, but really women's soccer too at one point really brought up people's interest in soccer. Men's soccer too. I know. Especially when they actually made it to the World Cup, and we're like, what? Wow. Yeah. But women's soccer, because they kept winning, actually winning for a long while, that really brought up a lot of interest, which is not a typical sport, the most popular sport always in the U.S. It is more popular now, but if you think about like 10, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't, which is unfortunate because it's a great sport. But like, unlike football is always going to be around, basketball is always going to be around, softball and baseball is definitely going to be around. But I'm hoping rugby, I don't know if they can you do that in high school? That seems like a huge liability, that sport.
Yeah.
I feel like she's putting it on the map, because I don't know one male rugby player.
I don't know
the one.
But to be fair, the women I know now.
Right. And I've known about her for a minute. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, I don't know about the men, but I know about Mar. Don't you worry.
Yeah, and I did read Actually, I think this was a comment one of the commentators made. It was about the basketball. The U.S. women's basketball, they've won 8 times in a row.
Yeah.
And they were saying they were kind of in shock that it was so close, I guess, because they're like, oh, this has just been a dynasty. But one of the women brought up, well, because people are seeing more and more women do this and do it well, the competition is getting stronger from other places that you might not typically associate with winning in basketball or whatever it is, because women's sport is becoming more popular and things like more broadcasts and all of that there are more competitors now, which is a great thing.
Which we love to see.
Yes, we do love to see it. So that's great. Oh, yes, there's so much we could talk about. Would love to hear from you listeners if we missed anything. As mentioned, the Paralympics are coming up. Mm-hmm. They are also working on gender parity, though at the time of recording, officials believe that only 42% of the athletes will be women, which is about the same percentage as in Tokyo Olympics. But that could change based on final numbers. But we'll check back in.
And if you're not following their TikTok, whoever their social media person is, they're great. They've gained a lot of attention for it. And the athletes.
I love it. Yes. And I really appreciated that too, about how many athletes would say, like, when they're like, what does this win mean to you at the end? They'd be like, watch the Paralympics.
Right. Yes. And Alana Mar was one of those.
Yes. So we'll check back in on that. Let us know if there's anything you're excited about. We should definitely check out. But yeah, in the meantime, send all of those thoughts our way. Suggestions our way. You can email us at stephanie@momstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book that has a whole chapter about women's sports. Check that out. You can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.